Today I will show you the best way to build a login form with placeholder text animation. Hi everyone, welcome to my pure CSS tutorial series where we explore what can be done with modern CSS3 techniques. Today we will learn about box sizing, text stroke, pseudo elements, pointer events, general sibling combinator and more. After watching this video, you will have a good idea how to use these CSS properties for real projects, and I will show you why these are great to have in your front-end web development coding toolkit. Before we start, don't forget to like the video. This is a new channel and I can really use your support. Subscribe and click the bell icon to get notified when I release a new tutorial. As you can see, we have some nice animations happening on the placeholder text, and the form title is coming out seamlessly from the form border. I haven't used any images, this is just plain text. And all this is done with pure CSS. Let me show you how in this quick tutorial. In index.html, I link style CSS file. All our HTML markup will be wrapped in a div with a class of container. Inside, we will have h1 heading element that says login and a form element. The form element will contain a div with a class of form group that will help us to hold our input and label together. Label will contain multiple spans, one for each letter. We will need a slider to create placeholder text animation effect with CSS. We will create 3 form groups, one for name, one for website, and one for email. We can also give it type of text, type of URL, and type of email accordingly. This will take care of very basic built-in HTML form validation. Lastly, we create an input element with a type of submit for our submit button inside of a div with a class of submit button wrapper. In style CSS, we start with basic reset rules to make sure our CSS appears the same in all browsers. If you're not familiar with box sizing, it's an amazing new CSS3 property that sets how the total width and height of an element is calculated. If you set it to border box, it tells the browser to count any border and padding as a part of element's width and height. The padding and border will be added to the final rendered size. Box sizing makes creating layouts so much easier, you should try to use it. According to caniuse.com, box sizing is supported in most modern browsers. The form is wrapped in a div with a class of container. I give the container width of 300 pixels and align it to the center of the page with the usual relative centering trick, position relative and margin 80 pixels auto. When you declare margins this way, the first value refers to margin top and bottom, in this case 80 pixels. Second value is margin left and right. If you set that to auto in combination with position relative, this will center your element horizontally in the middle of the page. Our CSS form will have 100% width of its parent element. We give it border 2 pixels solid black, border radius 10 pixels, this will create slightly round corners, and padding top bottom 60 pixels, left and right 0. We want our h1 heading element that says login to be outlined, and we want that outline to be coming out seamlessly from the border of our form. To do that, first we apply experimental property called WebKit text stroke. If I check MD and web docs, it says this feature is non-standard and is not on standards track. Do not use it on production sites facing the web. It will not work for every user. There may also be large incompatibilities between implementations and the behavior may change in the future. I've tested it and at the moment it works properly in the most modern browsers, including Safari. That being said, this effect can easily be polyfilled, replaced by carefully stacking multiple text shadows. You can apply multiple text shadows in CSS as a list of comma-separated values, like this. Font shadow is a safer technique as this will work in all browsers. I might do a quick video or CodePen demo on that one. WebKit text stroke accepts 2 parameters, it's a shorthand property. We will give it width 2 pixels, same as the border of our form, and black stroke color. We will give the text itself white color, font size 80 pixels, with 100% of the parent container, align center, and by giving it negative top value we bring it outside of the container. Now I create before and after pseudo elements on H1. These pseudo elements can only be attached to elements that can contain other elements inside. These container elements usually have opening and closing tags. At the time of recording, end of 2019, it is not possible to create before and after pseudo elements on input fields, for example. So my goal now is to hide few pixels on the bottom of the login text and position it absolutely so it appears the outline of the text is coming from the form border. Visual trickery. I will use before pseudo element to cover part of the text. I need to give it mandatory content value. This time I'll leave it empty. Position absolute, top 71 pixels, left 15 pixels, width 90%, height 50 pixels, and background color will be white. Then I create after CSS pseudo element. I will use that one to recreate bottom part of the letter G we have just hidden. This will make the text more readable and I think it's a nice effect. I give it content, letter G, again position it absolutely where it needs to be, give it black color and use clip path to cut off the top part. It will work in most browsers like this. Safari still needs WebKit prefix for clip path. Let's move on to the input fields. I give the inputs margin 20 pixels to create some space between them and padding 5 pixels to make more room for the text users will type inside. I remove the default border by setting it to none and I give it width. I also want to reset default styles browsers apply to input fields automatically, so when our input field is hovered or active, which means clicked, or focused, that is when the text cursor appears inside. For all these scenarios, I want the border and outline to be none, and background color to be invisible. Next, I will add animation to the placeholder text in form input fields. This is another CSS trick. Instead of giving inputs placeholder value, I will take the label element and position it absolutely over the input. You might already be thinking this will cause issues while clicking the input field, as the user's mouse will be interacting with the label text instead of the input field itself. Luckily for us, CSS has pointer events attribute, which allows user to define whether or not an element can be target of a mouse event. Let's set it to none. This will apply to all its children as well. I also want the black rectangle to appear behind our label and I want it to animate when that particular input field is active. There are many ways to do this. I decided to create a before pseudo element on the label and position it absolutely over the input field. I'm slightly jumping about now, sorry. Each label contains multiple span elements, one for each letter. When a user hovers the label, I want this placeholder text to animate up outside the border of the input field. To achieve that, I target each span every time hover event occurs on form group div. I will also do that every time input is focused, which means when the text cursor appears inside. Since the span is not inside the input, but it is inside label, which is input's sibling element, I need to adjust the CSS selector. I will use selector called general sibling combinator. I call it little squiggly line. I have to do input, focus, little squiggly line, label, space, span. To explain what's happening here, we need to understand that general sibling combinator matches the second element only if it follows the first element, and both are children of the same parent, so it's perfect for this scenario. It is useful whenever you want to apply hover effect on an element after hovering on its sibling. That's why I need to mention label element as part of the selector as well, and then go inside the label to target span. Otherwise, change on the input wouldn't be able to affect children of label, which is input sibling in our HTML structure. Hope I'm explaining this clearly. Let's move on. So whenever user hovers over form group and whenever focus event happens on input, I will apply transform translate y minus 22 pixels, and I will change color to black with 0.8 opacity on all span elements inside that particular label. Now let's use the same technique to animate the black rectangle behind our input fields. I want to make it collapse, so I give it height 0 and border 2 pixels solid black, so it acts as underline. The labels are not animating yet, and that is because I haven't declared styles for span yet. Sorry for not doing this in order, hopefully you can follow. Each label contains multiple span elements, one for each letter. By default, span is an inline element. I will change it to inline block so we can move it around. I will give it transition 0.3 seconds, and transition function will be cubic bezier with these values. This will give it a bit of a bounce. You can experiment with different values. Go to cubicbezier.com and try to create your own. I'll leave the link in the video description. Font size of our span will be 12 pixels, color white, line height 25 pixels to center it vertically, and z-index 10 to bring it to the front. Remember that z-index only works on elements that have position value declared. This time I'll give it position relative. When I started working with CSS, this was one of the things I used to get stuck on a lot, and I couldn't understand why my z-index wasn't working. It was because there was no position relative or position absolute declared on that element. Now our label is animating, but we need to tweak it a bit to achieve the final effect. Before we do that, let's quickly style our submit button to match the rest of the form. I will use input type submit selector, give it white color, font size 35 pixels, background color transparent, text transform lowercase, cursor pointer, font weight will be 700, and margin top 50 pixels to give it some space. Also WebKit text stroke 2 pixels black. I was gonna do more with the submit button, but every browser puts different default text on it, so it's difficult to make it consistent. In Chrome we get submit, in Firefox we get submit query. Whenever we hover the button, the text will change to black. I also have some colliding styles here because I declared some margins and paddings for all inputs earlier. Let's do margin 0, padding 0, and width 100% to center the button. To finalize the animated form, I go back to our span elements that sit inside labels to polish our input placeholder animation. I can see the longest word has 7 letters, so I create 7 span nth child selectors. For the end selector to apply properly, the elements need to be siblings so they can see each other. I will give each consecutive span slightly higher transition delay value. This creates the wave animation effect on hover. Hope you learned some new CSS today. Don't forget to like the video if you want more tutorials like this one. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to get notified when I release a new video. Also, while you're here, check out some other videos on my channel. I have playlists with creative CSS tutorials and vanilla JavaScript and HTML canvas animations. Thanks for watching and see you next time.